Robert Mugabe turns 90. Africa's oldest leader says he's not going anywhere. Freedom fighter for many, he's perceived as a dictator by Western countries. Robert Mugabe and Zimbabwe. This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to Inside Story. I'm Sami Zeidan. Africa's oldest head of state celebrates his 90th birthday on Friday. Robert Mugabe insists that despite his age, he's not ready for retirement. Zimbabwe will be marking its president's birthday with a lavish $1 million party. It's expected to exceed last year's bill when Mugabe was presented a cake said to weigh 89 kilos. Well, in a country still trying to get back on its financial feet, how much of a celebratory mood is there? Harun Mutasa sends us this update from Harare.
President Robert Mugabe will celebrate his birthday on Sunday in the town of Marondera, about 80 kilometers from the capital, Harare. According to media reports, the party should cost about $1 million. Government officials say officially the money is coming from donations from private companies and from the ruling ZANU-PF party. But critics say a large chunk of that money is coming from state coffers, and they're not happy about that. They say that the economy is struggling. They're saying that industry is operating at less than half its capacity, and they say that most people are jobless. When you talk to the average people on the street, they're saying they really are struggling to make ends meet. Parents are finding it really hard to find money to send their children to school. They're finding it hard to basically feed their families at the end of the day. That's a concern of the average Zimbabwean here, the economy, which is not doing very well. They want officials to put more attention on that instead of spending money on birthday celebrations.
Africa's most elderly statesman has been in power since 1980. That's when Zimbabwe gained independence from the British. Mugabe became president after leading a bloody guerrilla war against the colonial rulers of what was then Rhodesia. And his ZANU-PF party has been in power ever since, despite repeatedly being rocked by corruption scandals. Well, at age 90, Mugabe's aides insist he's fit and healthy, though he was on another medical trip to Singapore this week for eye surgery and is widely rumoured to have prostate cancer. Well, he could go on as president even longer. A new constitution passed before last year's disputed elections allows Mugabe to run again in 2018, meaning he could rule till the age of 99. There's a lot to talk about when it comes to Mugabe. To help discuss the issue, I'm joined here by our three guests from Harare. We have Albert Guto, MDC Harare Province spokesman. From London, Nick Mangwana, the UK chairman for ZANU-PF. And from Oxford, Chofamba Sitole, journalist and former editor of the Sunday Mirror in Zimbabwe. Good to have you with us. So we could start with Nick. How are Zimbabweans marking the birthday then, do you think, of Africa's oldest leader?
With a gala, with a good celebration, which befits a man that has taken us from the colonial bondage to liberty, a man that has empowered our nation. So, yeah, we are going to celebrate. We will be celebrating here in the UK. We'll be celebrating in Zimbabwe, in Marondera. So I heard somebody talking about $1 million being spent on a birthday. It's actually not Robert Mugabe who's gonna eat all the food, is it? It's the Zimbabwean youth. So it's part of the 21st movement. So we are very happy in celebrating the president's birthday.
All right, Chofamba, what keeps Mugabe popular? He's clearly still popular with some sections of society, isn't he? Is it his hero status from the War of Liberation?
Yes, I guess you could say that President Robert Mugabe is one of the last of the big men, those that derive from the African national liberation struggle, and having come through a bloody guerrilla war, as you just intimated, these credentials stand him on solid ground, as it were. And also, this narrative has had a re-energization in the late 90s to early 2000s when the fallout with the former colonial power Britain kicked in. the narrative that was reignited then was that neo-imperialist forces are trying to subvert, Zimbabwe's sovereignty. And so even those that were born after independence, they were mobilized into this thinking that time was now to gird our loins and defend national sovereignty. And President Mugabe stood up and reprised that role once more as the liberation champion. And so, in that sense, you see the popularity of Robert Mugabe resonating with those young people that are connected to ZANU-PF and some within the generality of the Zimbabwean nation.
Oh, Bert, how important is the war of liberation? How much of a focus is it for people, for a younger generation who are facing new challenges, economic challenges?
The war of liberation was obviously significant in the sense that it helped usher Zimbabwe into independence from many years of British colonial rule. But that said, we now have a generation of young Zimbabweans. More than 65% of Zimbabweans are below the age of 40. And most of these youths do not have first-hand information or knowledge of the independence war, or what some other people prefer to call the war of liberation. And I can safely say that the majority of the people of Zimbabwe, who, like I've already indicated, are the youths, are not very much enamored to that history of the struggle, in the sense that they would idolize a man who, at the very advanced age of 90, still wants to cling on to power, when it is quite clear that his past is sell-by date, and that it was high time he passed over the baton to at least a more youthful leader. Yes.
Mr. Gutu, you continue to get it wrong.
We are saying really
you got it wrong during the... You got it wrong during the elections. You didn't think the young people supported ZANU-PF.
No.
Actually, from our statistics, the majority of the young people are with us.
Support ZANU-PF. I was born and
you
bred
are wrong.
in Zimbabwe.
I'm not an old man myself.
I've lived in Zimbabwe.
I spent a long time in Zimbabwe. We were voted in by the young people.
Man, but you're the minority.
All right. Let me jump in here before
minority.
The country, perhaps I'll take it to Nick. The country does have a problem. Hang on a second, if you would, Mr. Obert. Nick, the country does have a problem, doesn't it, when it comes to unemployment? It's risen to anything from 10 to 60%, depending on whose figures you take, whether the official ones or the UN figures. Imports are rising faster than exports. The overall GDP per person has dropped since Mugabe came to power. Those are real issues, are they not? How do you respond to the accusation that Mugabe is trying to whip people up with patriotism to distract them from the real issues? Your response to that?
That's not correct. We have attributed, and the honest truth is, the problem with unemployment is coming from sanctions, which have been imposed on our country. If these sanctions are uplifted, we will...
The S word.
You call it tired.
Okay, hang on, Over. Let him finish the sentence, and we'll come to you in a second.
The sanctions have caused the shrinkage in our industry. They've undermined our own currency to an extent that we are using foreign currency right now as a means of trade. So once the sanctions are lifted again off our country, we are going to grow as a country. Our GDP is going to go back to where it was supposed to be. That's the primary issue here.
Okay, all right.
The sanctions which Obert and his colleagues called for.
Let me bring Obert into this discussion. I mean, is there not an element of truth here in that Zimbabwe has been under sanctions, and there are those who say the West seems singularly obsessed with Mugabe, perhaps because of his past in resisting colonial rule. There are a lot of countries in Africa that have problems, that have corruption, that have problematic human rights records. But is there not an obsession with Zimbabwe and with Robert Mugabe and punishing the country?
There's no obsession as such. There's no obsession as such, because the way I look at it, the biggest challenge that we have in Zimbabwe since 1980 has been unprecedented corruption in this country. When you look at it, when we got independence in April 1980, Zimbabwe was arguably the second largest economy in Southern Africa, in the southern region. Zimbabwe was the bread basket of Africa, so to speak. Zimbabwe was exporting to the world. we were a net food exporter. And thanks to Mr. Mugabe and ZANU-PF, we are now a basket case.
And that's
where
not
we
because
have
of sanctions, though?
at least 60% of the people.
That's not because of sanctions have
it's
played
not
no
because
role?
of sanctions. It's actually because of misrule, because of corruption. Sanctions.
There
I've always said sanctions
is no
have been
doubt.
overplayed.
There is no doubt.
All right.
There is no doubt that there's corruption in the
If I may
country.
come in,
All right, let me bring
It's
Chofamba into the
unprecedented
discussion.
corruption.
Yes. If I may come in with a perspective there in response to, first to Nick and then also to Obed. I think there is a lot of disquiet among Zimbabweans about the consistent promotion of sanctions as, the explanation for everything that has gone wrong in Zimbabwe. Bear in mind that you started off with a mention of the hard facts, concerning unemployment and economic performance, leading up to the time before the sanctions came into force. So already we had a trajectory unfolding that did not quite support ZANU-PF as a competent manager of the national economy. Those issues were now of concern.
Every country.
And then secondly, no, wait, let me finish. No, let me finish.
Okay,
gentlemen,
I want to respond.
then I think I'm going to have to jump in because everybody's wanting to talk now.
Everything that is acceptable
If we could, Chofamba, let's fast forward. We're talking about this is, the birthday of Africa's oldest leader. Let's look towards the future. Now, Mugabe has brought in some new policies like Zim Asset. It's supposed to turn the country's economy around. Is it working?
That's a laughing stock, Zim Asset. It's not working.
No,
Zim
Zim
Asset, when
Asset,
you look at it, it's actually
Hang
an
on,
exercise in
gentlemen.
futility.
Let Chofamba have his 2 cents worth here, then we'll come to you.
Okay, I think I was interrupted before I made the second part of my point. That one, the sanctions excuse is rather spacious. Fine, there is, a level at which sanctions affected the economy. But also, before sanctions came into force, we must bear in mind the hard facts which reflect an economic downturn. So there is an explanation there outside of the sanctions to explain.
Okay, Chofamba, you've made that point.
The declining Zimbabwean economy.
I want to try and move forward a little bit.
That of course. Obed says there's no obsession by the international community on Zimbabwe, but quite clearly that is the reason why Zimbabwe is so prominent on the international agenda ahead of countries where outright civil war has broken out. That is the reason why Britain and the EU and the US are more invested in Zimbabwe than they are in the DRC, for instance, where war has always raged.
Okay, all right, point taken. Your point is there's a bit of both, mismanagement and obsession. I'm going to turn the question back now to Mr. Obert in Harare. Let's look forward, okay? I know the sanctions debate versus economic mismanagement, that can go on for a very long time, but I want to look forward in this show. Are the new policies which ZANU-PF have brought in, are they working? Zim Asset, it's supposed to be turning around the country's economy, it's supposed to be leveraging resources to attract foreign capital.
No, it's not working. If I could say, since the stolen election of July 31, 2013, there's actually been an unprecedented liquidity crunch. And for the past 6 or 7 months since the stolen election of July the 31st last year, there's been so much suffering to the extent that on the average, 30 companies are closing every week countrywide. And as I'm talking, this year alone, since the beginning of 2014, 723 companies have been closed countrywide.
Okay, but
9
are all the
companies were
stats
actually
negative?
liquidated
Albert,
on
I'm
one
looking at
day in
stats
the
here
night.
from the World
It's
Bank that says
actually
growth is
a
expected to
sorry
rise to 4.2%. That's according to the World Bank. I'm not taking the official statistic of over 6%. There are positive stats. Inflation is down to around 2% from 231 million percent in 2008.
Why? Because we're now using the multi-currency. Yes, I could answer that. Inflation is actually very low because, as you know, since February 2009, we have not been using the Zimbabwe dollar. We are using predominantly the United States dollar, and in some cases, like the western part of the country in Bulawayo and the western provinces of the country, they use the South African rand, and in some other cases, they use the British pound sterling and the euro. But that is the main reason really why we have this very low rate of inflation. But when you look at the rate of production, when you walk into a supermarket in Zimbabwe, in Harare, in Gweru, in Bulawayo, in the villages, you notice that not less than 90% of all the goods that you find in our shops, supermarket shelves, are actually imported goods.
Right.
We have actually
Okay.
become virtually a supermarket for South Africa.
All right,
and
let
that's
me bring-
not good for a country that was once the breadbasket of the Southern
Okay,
African
let's
region.
bring Nick into that discussion. Production is falling, businesses are closing down. Doesn't sound like the government policy is working if you listen to Mr. Obert.
The government policy is working. ZimAsset is an agenda which has to run from October 2013 to 2018. The quick gains in ZimAsset have to, I mean, we will be realized after 15 to 18 months. These are birth pains. You cannot stop a revolution because people.
Yeah.
Yes, these are birth pains because
I don't know what
we have a
media is
program
this
which is
much
5-year
better.
program. Are you looking at? Oh well, we in the UK we experienced double depreciations from 2007. We only started growth in 2012. So it took that long to have this growth.
There's
And
no growth
what's the difference with
If
Zimbabwe?
anything, there's deflation.
We are having a growth.
People are
Hang on,
suffering.
Robert.
There's no food.
Nick, let
There are
me
no
make
jobs.
this point to you.
I let you speak.
Hang on, Robert. Let me
you
put this
speak.
question
So
to you, Nick. Some ask, with the challenges, clearly Zimbabwe is a country with challenges. I'm sure you would agree on that point at least. Is Robert Mugabe the person who can lead Zimbabwe through such a very difficult minefield of challenges at the age of 90?
That's correct. He's still the best person to lead Zimbabwe through these challenges. He's very cognitively intact. He's still a visionary, and I think he's the right person to do that. Yeah.
All right, let me bring Chofamba back into the discussion. A lot of it seems the policies going forward rely on the ability to bring in foreign investment. Is it coming in?
No, foreign investment is a hard nut to crack at this moment. Even Finance Minister Chinamasa's trip to Washington did not bring back any positive fruits. And his next trip to China also came with promises, but very little substance. And in the final analysis, the challenge of ZimAsset as an economic strategy is not its content, because many, including critics, have hailed it as a sound document or sound proposals. But the challenge is, how do you fund it? And there is no discernible source of the kind of money, up to $27 billion, required to drive this. And may I just say one thing about on the topic, the question that you just threw about whether President Mugabe is the right person to drive Zimbabwe forward. I think I would agree with Nick insofar as he recognizes President Robert Mugabe as visionary, intellectually astute. But in terms of the structure of government, where there is a lot of centralization and President Mugabe carries a lot of executive authority, whenever he is away, for instance, in Singapore, cabinet does not meet, key decisions are not made. So in terms of the executive authority of driving, government, I think there does need an injection of energy.
I could see Albert wanted to add something there. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was saying, when you look at the way this country has been run, quite honestly, you cannot entrust the fortunes of a country in the hands of a 90-year-old man. With due respect, I'll be the first one to accept that he's intellectually astute, yes. But look, the man is way past his sell-by date. We watched last night on local television, Zimbabwe television, when he was actually talking about his birthday, on the eve of his 90th birthday. And all the telltale signs of a man who is not in the best of health were there. He was not his usual eloquent,
this man was
erudite
voted in by Zimbabweans.
person. You could tell that with respect, he's not in the best of shape physically.
That's all. You are not there to
all right,
look
Albert,
at
you made your
television.
point. Let Nick have a go here.
Who is the right to lead for the country? This man was voted in overwhelmingly. End of story. End of story. He was voted in overwhelmingly. You voted against him, but the rest of us voted for him. That's it.
All right,
That's
now
all
Nick,
that matters.
he may have been voted in. There were disputes about the elections, of course. But can I put this point to you? A question here.
Sure.
There are allegations the government is failing to tackle corruption, for example, which doesn't help the investment climate. Just to give an example, in
right.
2009, let me give you this example. In 2009, for example, Human Rights Watch spoke about corruption at the diamond mining company Marange Resources. In 2014, the relatively pro-ZANU-PF newspaper, The Herald, alleged corruption at the same firm. This is 5 years later. Is the government doing enough?
Okay. The government is doing more than enough. I'll give you examples. All the things that you're talking about, all the corruption that's being cited is because the government is cleaning its house, the government is disclosing this. It's not like there's some whistleblower somewhere who is unveiling all this. We are saying as a government, this is what has been happening in the Para-State House, which were most of them under the MDC during the GNU. Before then, there was no dollar to talk about, so there was nothing happening in the Para-State House. But between 2009 and 2013, the MDC set on most of these. Gordon Moyo was actually the minister in charge of Para-State House. He didn't do nothing. Now that we're disclosing that this has been happening, you turn around and say you are wrong. You did this, you did that. Do you want us to go back? Do you want us to go underground? We are not going underground. We are disclosing. We are saying we are going to go for result-based management. If we are going to focus on result-based management, we are changing the whole corporate governance structure of the country. That's what we are doing.
Nick,
that's how.
Okay, Nick, let's let Albert. Let's give a comeback to Albert here. Albert, go ahead.
Yeah. Nick, can you just cool down, my brother? We have got no less than 78 parastatals in Zimbabwe. 78 parastatals, all of them pegged with ZANU-PF cronies. Each and every one of those 78 parastatals has been mismanaged. We're talking with the Zimbabwe National Railways, NRZ. We're talking of ZESA, the power utility. We are talking of ZUPCO, the public bus company. We are talking of ZBC, what is supposed to be the public broadcaster. We are talking here.
Are you going to list 78 countries while it's companies while it's
$230,000 per month in the instance of PASMAS, which is actually pegged with ZANU-PF cronies. Where in the world, Nick, have you ever come across anyone who
during that time, the Minister of Health was
Okay, Albert, let me ask you this question.
The person in charge of that
Albert, let me ask you this question. All of the things, all of the accusations which are made to the government, Albert, could not the same accusations and criticisms be made of the opposition? Morgan Tsvangirai has been accused of being power-obsessed by members of the party. Morgan Tsvangirai's party is fractured. And when he was Prime Minister in 2012, the same newspaper, The Herald, was running articles about corruption in his press office.
There is actually nothing like that. Morgan Tsvangirai remains the face of the democratic struggle in Zimbabwe. And the reason why there is a frenzy in the ZANU-PF controlled media about Morgan Tsvangirai is because they realize that he is a tough nut to crack. And they realize that with Morgan Tsvangirai out of the way, then they are going to have their cake and eat it. That's why they've done everything they can, including infiltrating.
All right, Albert, we've just got about a minute left, so I want to bring Chofamba into the discussion, if I may. Chofamba, looking at the political map, it doesn't look good, does it? The party of Morgan Tsvangirai has fractures, the party ZANU-PF has fractures. What sort of future do you see awaits Zimbabwe?
Well, it is it's an uncertain future in the sense that both parties are facing succession challenges. But I would say that the opposition right now is in a worse off situation than ZANU-PF because the man in central control of ZANU-PF is still firmly in charge. Robert Mugabe is in charge of ZANU-PF, and he is in a position to dictate, the course and nature of the transition in ZANU-PF. Morgan Tsvangirai cannot. He is fighting for his political life. Right now, the MDC cannot intervene on the national agenda because it is turning inward and has to resolve its own internal contradictions. Now, ZANU-PF has contradictions, but underneath a very a centralized command structure with Robert Mugabe on top. The worst that could happen is being 90, how far can he go? And will things have been resolved to provide certainty? That is the question.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. It's been a brilliant discussion. Let's thank all of our guests. Obert Gutu from the MDC in Harare, from London, Nick Mangwana from the ZANU-PF party, and journalist Chufamba Sitole. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us here on this edition of Inside Story. As always, if you want to send us your feedback, just email us your thoughts at insidestory@aljazeera.net. For now, it's goodbye.